Hello and welcome to this video demonstration. My name is John Alexander and today we'll be talking about formZ and NextLimit's rendering application Maxwell Render. What do we cover in the demonstration? Well, we'll take a look at how formZ and Maxwell can be used together to create extremely high quality images. These models were created by formZ artists in formZ and rendered in Maxwell. As you can see, these images are virtually indistinguishable from photographs. We'll show you how you can make renders that rival the high-quality images you've seen in 3D computer graphics magazines and on the web. Above all, we'll show you how easy it is. What is formZ? Well, formZ is our flagship product here at Autodesk, and it's a super easy to use 3D design modeling application for quickly creating 3D models of your ideas. It has speedy reshaping and drawing tools that allow anyone to jump in and create their own models. formZ is also a NURBS modeler, so anyone can create organic shapes like circus-soleil tents, boats, and even cars. You're not limited to rectangular geometry. The great thing about formZ is the models that you sketch with it are accurate CAD models that are suitable for export to CNC milling and rapid prototyping machines with no other software needed. Here is an example of a building we created in another webinar. This is Santiago Caltrava's Opera House in Valencia, Spain. And this is the 3D printed version. You can see how powerful this 3D printing technology is for pre-visualization. Sometimes clients simply want images instead of physical 3D models. For that, we can turn to Maxwell for rendering. Well, what is Maxwell? Maxwell is a third-party rendering application for Mac and Windows that you can purchase from NextLimit at nextlimit.com. Maxwell has great new features like Maxwell Fire, which is this real-time rendering window that allows you to preview your render as you work on your file, and also Maxwell Grass, which is a nice way of adding grass to your images. This is certainly one of the grails of computer graphics, the ability to add grass to your ground plane and simply have it render out grass at render time. We'll also be talking about multi-light, which is a feature that allows you to change the intensities of lights in your image during and even after the render is complete. So you can create multiple images with different light setups for the same render. If you already have formZ, you know you can show off your models using several included display modes like a vector-based hidden line mode. There's a doodle mode for creating hand-drawn looks, and two real-time shaded surface modes that support outlines and shadows. These allow you to walk through and navigate around your models in 3D. These are very rapid ways of visualizing your models, but if you want more realism, you can opt for rendering still images and using a separate rendering add-on package like RenderZone or Maxwell. Now, RenderZone is the rendering product we offer here at Autodesk. Here are some images of projects rendered with RenderZone. Now, RenderZone can be a faster renderer than Maxwell, but Maxwell has features that make the renders more realistic, so it can in many cases be worth the extra rendering time. I should mention that Maxwell has been made much faster since it was originally released years ago, not only in the time it takes to start the render, but in the actual rendering itself. So exterior renders in particular are quite rapid now, and there are other workflow features that make Maxwell a very nice fit for rendering formZ models. Maxwell does work differently under the hood than RenderZone, and Maxwell creates its images by calculating through all the equations that describe actual light and takes no shortcuts, whereas RenderZone takes a shortcut here and there. And so since Maxwell calculates all possible effects in a nutshell, rendering with Maxwell is just like taking a picture of your model. So you can see here in this image, we're really starting to look exactly like a photograph. In fact, I'm not sure you could tell this wasn't a photograph. Now, Maxwell, since all the render settings are already set up, Maxwell doesn't have vast numbers of hard-to-understand controls like some of the other high-end rendering apps do, but you can easily match the quality of their images. So with Maxwell, the render settings are established and you always get the right image, so you can really focus strictly on getting a quality image. So you'll spend more time as an art director and less time as a technician. So Maxwell and formZ together can really help you unleash your creativity. Here's a good example of a multi-light demonstration where we've got one model with two different times of day. This can actually be done in the same render, as we'll take a look at towards the end of our demonstration. Here's the image we'll actually be using for that demo. And let's end our slideshow here with these drums by Des Clark. Now, this is not a real set of drums in a photograph. This is a formZ model and a Maxwell render. Okay, well, before we go ahead and jump right into formZ, let me show you some of the resources that are available to you on our website, which is at formZ.com. On the right side of the page, you'll see the webinars link where you can go and find whatever webinar might be coming up. And there's also this Webinars on Demand button here in the lower right-hand corner of the page, which will take you to our Webinars on Demand page. Now, this holds all the webinars that we have done in the past, and you can watch these at any time. Another place you can go for content on our website, video content in particular, is this formZ page, and then click on the video link. You will find the sort of tutorial videos that come with formZ in a format that you can access them online here. So each one of these videos is short and to the point and will get you going with whatever part of the program it is that you'd like to learn that particular moment. On our website, we also have a link here for the Facebook page, so feel free to visit our Facebook page often and at any time to find out what's going on in the world of formZ, and certainly feel free to like our page while you are there. All right, let's go ahead and jump right here into formZ and get started working on our model. I want to start by launching a Maxwell render. Now, once you've added Maxwell to formZ, you're going to get this formZ or this Maxwell render icon up here in your dock or in your set of render tools. And when you launch it, you'll see that a new process shows up here in the dock, and then a render begins. Now, you get the whole image at once, so you don't have to worry about a texture down here at the bottom that you may not have gotten right. As a scanline renderer, you might remember renders down the screen and kind of leaves you wondering what might be down here. But Maxwell renders your whole image at once. It does start grainy and then becomes more and more distinct as the render cooks. So the longer we let it run, the more and more accurate the render is going to become. Let's go ahead and stop this. I want to mention, though, right now that while formZ, or rather while Maxwell is working like this, you can come back here into formZ and work on your model while that is rendering. So the whole day long, basically, Maxwell can sort of be in the background rendering your images. When you've added Maxwell to formZ, you'll also find this Maxwell Fire window here. I'm going to go ahead and activate that so we can see what happens. And you can see we automatically get a representation of what's in our modeling window. If we change our modeling window, that'll automatically be updated right there in that Fire window. We can even create geometry, and that will appear there. We can delete geometry. We can change textures. That's not the geometry I want to delete. I want to delete this geometry. Now, one thing you'll notice right away, which I want you to be cognizant of, is although we have this wonderful rendering program that makes photorealistic renders, we're way far away from that here, and that's because we haven't done any texturing on our model. So this white featureless shelf really is going to need some photographs added to it to begin to look like a wooden shelf. So we would hope that here in formZ we would be allowed to drag images over onto our model and then move those around in real time right on the surfaces. And of course, that's how formZ works. So let me show you how easy it is to get your model ready for rendering here in Maxwell. I'm just going to drag a couple images over onto my shelf, and then I'm going to get my Edit Textures tool, and with my snapping on, I'm able to edit these textures and sort of stretch them in real time so that they fit perfectly on my model. Now, maybe I want to make a slight little revision here. As I zoom in here, the Maxwell window will show me whether or not my knot is lined up here. I don't know whether it is or not, but it looks like if I pull this down here a little bit, it'll look a little bit better, maybe. Let's go ahead and do something with the backsplash or the wall here. I'm not actually changing tools. I'm allowed to drag textures down onto my model while I am actually working on it. Oops, let me go ahead and turn my snap back on so I can get this just perfect. I'll click that right there. All right, now let's go pick out a view, and let the Maxwell Fire window show us the magic. So this is sort of the final render that we're after here, and we're able to see this in Maxwell Fire. If we're happy with this, we can go ahead and hit the Maxwell Render button as we did at the beginning to get our final render. In this case, I want to actually show you something else, and it has to do with this notion that Maxwell calculates through all of the parameters that light actually goes through as it bounces off objects. In the case of a solid object, it would be possible for a subsurface scattering effect to take place. Now, subsurface scattering is a real good example in real life is when you have a flashlight in front of your fingers and you see that orange glow through there, and that is because the light is actually making it, some of the photons are making it through your fingers, and they are lighting up your fingers in that way. If you move the flashlight to the thicker part of your arm, you certainly won't see that red glow because there's no way for the photons to make it all the way through your arm. This subsurface scattering feature is available in Maxwell. It works through the materials, and materials in Maxwell are called MXMs, and I'm going to talk more about those in detail later on. So don't worry about it. Just know that you get some really nice preset ones to play around with at the beginning, and some of these are some nice subsurface scattering materials. Jade behaves this way, you know, where you have a lighter appearance wherever the material is thinner, and a darker appearance wherever it is thicker. All right, so let's go ahead and skip out of here. And then I want to go ahead and come into my settings here and turn off display grass because we're going to be talking about grass a little bit later, and I don't necessarily want to fire that up right now. So let's switch over here, gears a little bit to a more architectural project and see what we get in our Maxwell Fire window. You can see right away we're getting a beautiful exterior, the start of a beautiful exterior image. It looks like all we're going to have to do is hit Maxwell Render for render the large full resolution render to have a final finished image. So how did I set this up? And that's what I want to go into. There's two things you need to think about when setting up a render. One is what is my illumination, or where the heck is my light coming from? And also, what are my surfaces defined as? Are they concrete? Are they grass? Are they brick, stucco, glass? What are they? So we need to define those as well. So let's go ahead and start with looking at lighting. Now, Maxwell comes with and adds several different light types to your arsenal here in formZ, and one of these is the physical sky. In fact, whenever you start up a new project, you're going to get this physical sky added. It'll ask you if you want to add this physical sky to a new project, and you do want to do that because when you render with Maxwell, you need a light in there. Now, this physical sky is a wonderful sky and atmosphere system. You get a sun with it, which you can turn on or off with the checkbox. You can also change the power of it, but the power of the sun is always the same. So you want to really leave this at 1. It's really the atmosphere that changes whether the sun is diffuse or it has a very or it comes directly and hits the earth and makes very sharp shadows. I don't know what any of this stuff here is, so it looks more in tune with something a weatherman might know. So maybe if we go to Google, we could learn more about it. But also, Maxwell comes with these skies, preset skies, that you can go in here and get and try out. So here are some presets that have been supplied by the folks at Next Limit, so you can try out some different things. It looks like you can do San Francisco fog and sunset orange, hell. Maybe you can make skies from another planet even. Now, for locating our sun, there's a couple of different ways we're allowed to do that. One is origin, center of interest, where we just stick it wherever we want it to be. Another is by site and time, and architects will be interested in this for solar studies and just in the idea that we're going to be accurate. In this case, I've selected Akron, Ohio from my list of cities and countries, just because that's where I'm located, or very close to there, where my wife is from, actually. But our building is actually the Educatorium at Utrecht by Rem Koolhaas. So that's actually in the Netherlands, but we're just going to use this time and date for now. Okay, so that's how I would think about going ahead and setting up my lighting for any exterior. It always works and works every time and gives me this blue sky and everything back here. So it really does a great job. Now let's go ahead and talk about the materials very quickly. I want to talk about these because all sorts of different things work with Maxwell. You get some Maxwell materials that you can use, and using this, clicking here will allow you to go ahead and access a Maxwell material by clicking here on reference MXM, and then you can go find the MXM that you want. Those are very realistic textures. But you can also use the ones that come with formZ, either with the shaded version or render zone, and they will render out very, very well. And the reason I want to bring this up is because obviously formZ comes with a large amount of material libraries here that you can use to hit the ground running as far as creating your initial texturing in your model. So all that will work. Your old formZ files will work, and you could also add your own MXMs if you wanted to. Now there's a place you can go to get more MXMs, and that is this Maxwell Render Resources Center. There are over 4,000 materials here that other users have uploaded. You've also got Maxwell Skies that we looked at there. We're not going to look at HDRIs, but if you know what these are little lighting setups that also include a 360-degree background that work together. It actually sets the lighting up in your scene and then works together with the background, which is the simplest way to explain it. You can find these all over the web, and obviously there are some here that you can play around with as well. Alright, so the next thing we probably want to go ahead and do is add some grass and some trees here to this. But I thought we'd go into looking at the Maxwell Render settings here very quickly first, because I want to give you a quick tour of those so you know how to set these up when you first start. Now, hitting F9 will bring up the display options for all the renderers in formZ, so we're just going to choose this Maxwell tab. Okay, now there's 5 tabs that run here across the top, and each one has a certain number of settings in there, but there are only 1, 2, or 3, or 4 of these across all these tabs that you need to understand it all to get started with. And the first one is this time. This will be set to 30 minutes by default, which is probably fine for small, simple renders like our dice render, or even a nice, simple exterior. But once you start rendering city blocks and interiors and things, you're going to want to give it more than 30 minutes of time to render with. And we've already seen that the longer you let something render, the better it gets until it's reached its quality level or sampling level here we're going to talk about in a second. So just crank this all the way over to the right to give yourself as much time as possible. Sampling level is another way of stopping a render in Maxwell. It'll actually stop based on a certain level of quality. 25 is a great level to leave alone for a beginner. You can also go ahead and turn on this multi-light intensity because at some point when you start rendering with Maxwell, it's going to be really nice to be able to change the intensities of the light. So that's one that I often will turn on by default myself. Under the Image tab, the image format is where can be found in here. It's set to ping by default, and that's lossless, so there's really nothing to change in here. Moving over to the camera tab, there's a couple of settings in here which are important. One is the f-stop and obviously the shutter speed. Since Maxwell automatically takes care of all of your other render settings, there's no settings to mess with. So the only thing that you can really need to control is the exposure of your image, so that's basically how bright it is. If you're a photographer, you're going to know what this f-stop means. This is, of course, the camera metaphor, and you will be able to set this accordingly. If you don't know what this is, you can go to a wiki obviously on photography and look up f-stop and read about this, but I'm going to give you my quick 1-minute take on this, or layman's take on how to set this up or how I think about doing it. F-stop, if you move it over to the right, will give you a nice crystal clear image. If you start moving it over to the left, there's a chance you could wind up showing depth of field effects, which are where areas of an image may become blurry. For example, you might want to have a depth of field effect where you have your subject in focus, but your background blurry. So I'll often just crank this all the way over to the right or pick a very high value like 32 so that my images are always going to come out very sharp and crisp to begin with. And then I need to modify my shutter speed usually to a lower amount in order to compensate for that. So whenever you make a change to f-stop, you're also going to need to make a change to shutter. One thing that will alleviate you needing to make a change to shutter is checking this box called EV lock. If you're happy with your image with no depth of field and you've got your f-stop and shutter working in tandem with each other creating the exposure you want, but you'd like to add in depth of field, we know if you go move your f-stop slider down, you're going to start to change your exposure. If you check this box, it will automatically keep those two values such that your exposure will always match what you have in your window already. Other stuff here can forget all about. No need to learn any of that at first. Simulens, no need for any of that at first. That's more advanced. And then File, you can leave alone. It automatically exports files that you're going to need to work on your project. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at adding some trees here. First of all, we have a component system here in formZ that you can use to add billboard trees. This library of billboard trees comes with formZ, and you can use this in order to populate your scene with trees. So let me go ahead and stick a few of these in here. I'm going to go ahead and check this box for align with view. Since they are billboard trees, they do need to align to my camera when I render them. So I'm just going to go ahead and start putting these in my scene here. And then I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Maxwell Fire window here and pick out a nice view. And then activate the fire window so that we can see our trees. So since these billboard trees work with Maxwell, this is yet another value that Maxwell and formZ together provide you, this ability to drop trees into your scenes and have them work no matter what angle you're watching or looking at them from, and obviously rendering in Maxwell. Alright, so the next thing that we want to be able to do here is add grass to our scene. And in order to do that, I want to look at a few images here first, and then we'll go ahead and show you some grass. This is the Educatorum image after I've made a final render of it in Maxwell, and you can see that I've added the grass in here. I'm going to show you how I did that in just a second and show you how to think about setting up grass in your scenes. Let's take a quick look at some of the images here. They never show up in the order you want them to. Here's a quick grass test that was done by Peter Lindbaum, one of our formZ customers, and Maxwell customers created this to test it out. Here's one that's available on the Maxwell website. Shows you what you can do with grass. Here's a test that's done by controlling densities and different parameters of the grass with image maps. I'm going to show you that as well. And here's a really nice image that someone's gone to a lot of trouble to make a really nice grass with this, with a bunch of different combined images, I presume. This is by Herb Steph Mindbender. I hope I said that correctly. But that's the genius behind this image. Now let's go back to formZ and take a look at some grass. I've got a grass file open here. When I want to render grass, I need to come in here and make sure my display grass is checked in my fire window. And then once I've done that, I can just check fire and then see the grass in my window. Now, one of the things that needs to be controlled with grass is the density, because even though computers are very, very powerful these days, because it's so easy to make multiples and get into millions of blades of grass, it's possible to make enough grass fairly easily that will bring your computer to its knees. So you need to have a way of starting small and building your way up, and you do that by controlling the grass with the density. So let me show you first of all how we put the grass onto a plane and then how we change its parameters. First of all, you just select your plane, and then under the tool options you can come here to this drop down and choose Maxwell Attributes, and then a Maxwell Attributes box will open. Now, geometry modifiers can be subtracted or they can be added, and they can be edited. So in this case, we want to modify our grass entry in our grass library. In this case, it's the default grass definition. You could also create new definitions and save them. In this case, I'm using formZ material number 1 that will be on my grass. So that's why it's green. The base that I have it on is white, and I have it that way for now so that you can see the density of the grass. In a minute, we're going to drop this texture onto our plane as well, and in conjunction with those blades, we're going to have a very nice grass. Now, density is controlled here as blades per square foot. So if I come in here, I've got 250. Let's say I want to see what it looks like with twice as much density here. I'm going to change the number, and then I'll go ahead and render it. And we should see a much, much denser set of grass. So we can still see the white through there. So maybe let's drag our image down here and apply that to our plane as well, and then Maxwell Fire will catch up here in a second and show us exactly what that looks like. So you can see that between doing those two things, we now have a very, very convincing set of grass blades. I'm going to go ahead and put this back on here. Now I want to show you another way that you can control the density, and I mentioned it, touched on it already, and that is you can control it with an image. So I'm going to come in here and load up an image that I've created. I've made on my desktop this density map. If you look at it, you can see it looks sort of like a big T. And I'm going to go ahead and see what this now looks like here in our Fire window. So now we should be actually using the T as opposed to our standard density setting. So now we're able to control the density with a map, and it looks here like the map needs to be applied here to the object. So let me go ahead and do that, and click the Fire window again, and see that we have now used our image to control the density of the grass. So if we come back into our Maxwell attributes for the grass, you can see that there's quite a few different things that we can control with an image. Anywhere you see this checker pattern, you can load in an image. Now, so you can control the length by an image. You could actually have different images control different things, which is obviously how the individual that made the more advanced grass example that I showed you before did that. Other important things that you can change are the angle and the bend. So these control, a level of variation in the grass, which you can mess with all you want. These default values to me seem pretty good for architectural grass. Down here are a couple of important settings. One is cutoff, and I think this is great because I've seen grass before in other applications, and I don't know of any that allow you to show a mowed lawn. And obviously all the grass you look at during your lifetime has probably been cut with a mower. So in order for grass to look right, it's probably going to need to look like it's been cut. So Maxwell allows us to do that. We can make it look like it's been cut off at 50% or what have you. Another important factor here, or another thing that you want to be aware of, a feature in this set of parameters, is this level of detail. This is view dependent and will control the amount of level of detail or number of blades of grass per square foot based on the distance away from the camera. So at 0, you should expect to see the full density. At 100 feet and beyond, you should expect to see a density of 4. So as you get further and further away from the camera, you will have less and less grass blades. And this will help you to avoid creating too much grass at the beginning. So I suggest to get started with the grass is go ahead, as I've done here, start up a little ground plane, put some blocks on it, and start playing around with it. Okay, so that's it for our grass and exterior that we've looked at. I want to go ahead now and take a look at an interior setup and eventually show you, end with the multi-light demonstration. Alright, so now I have an interior here, and I want to talk about the illumination setup here very quickly. Because I have, a curtain wall of glass on either side, my approach on the outside is very similar to any other exterior render. If I want to look at my lights palette, I'll see that I have my physical sky set up, and I've got my sun. So out of doors, we're going to have the same physical sky automatic setup that all of our other images have used. Now, I've added some of our component trees here so that as the light falls through the trees, they will cast dappled shadows onto the floor of my building here, and perhaps add some interest to an otherwise, kind of boring area of my render. Now, since it is an interior, I needed to go ahead and set up some lights as well. So up here I've got some track lights. I've also got some other lights stashed around in here that you can't quite see. But how I've made them actually emit light is I've used what's called a Maxwell emitter. Now, a Maxwell emitter is essentially a Maxwell material that emits light. Whenever you choose one of these MXMs that emits light and you want it to emit light, you need to come in here and make sure that you have this is emitter checked, because that'll make sure it definitely glows and emits light for you. If not, it's not going to do that, and you may be wondering why not. If so, that's the problem. So for each one of these MXMs that I use, I will get a slider in multi-light, which will allow me to control an entire bank of lights at a time. For example, all these lights use the same MXM, and other lights use other MXM. So when I go to do my render, I'll have a slider for each one of those separately. So let's go ahead and look at what happens here in my image. Now, I've used all MXM materials in this particular image because I wanted to really get as close to realistic as I could. And Maxwell is incredibly great at doing this glossy reflection thing. In fact, many surfaces in real life have an element of glossy reflection, whether it's, jumps up and hits you in the face or not. It doesn't matter. Your mind is sort of expecting to see some type of glossy reflection on there. Very few surfaces are actually matte. Here on the floor, you can see this very subtle glossy reflection here that really makes the floor look very realistic. So the next thing and final thing to look at is the multi-light, and this, of course, is the fun part. Now, as I said, for each emitter in our light, in our file, each emitter that we've added for our lights, we're going to get a slider. So we have one here for light 1, 2, and 3. And also it gives you one for the sun, for the physical sky, and for the image-based lighting. Now, I've used an image-based light environment map here to fill in the background so that I have a background going on here. So what I want to be able to do here is change this into a nighttime image. I've let this render overnight, and I have my daytime image, and now I'd like to have my nighttime image. Well, it turns out that Maxwell allows us to do that because it's recorded all of the different intensities of these lights per pixel, so I can go ahead and just change these however I see fit. Now, I want to keep my eye up here on my preview. In order to make a nighttime scene, I'm obviously going to turn off the sun, the physical sky, and the image-based light. And then I'm going to perhaps increase the intensities of these lights that I have in here. Let me turn two of them down so you can see just the track lights. All those track lights are controlled by this one slider. And there's a couple other lights I have stashed throughout the scene that I can go ahead and bring up. So now that I'm happy with my image up here under preview, I can simply hit refresh. And Maxwell will go ahead and update the image to show those changes. So this is the 2000 pixel wide image, and it has actually changed the actual lighting conditions in here. You can see that now that it's absolutely black outside, that we have a nice reflection here in our glass. The track lights that shine down through our table producing multiple caustic shadows. So this is a real image. You don't see those glossy highlights that you had from the side anymore, and you can see some that come from the interior lighting. So for every pixel in the image, the lighting information for each one of these has been saved. Let's go ahead and do another one of these. These are called, I like to call them mixies. They're actually MXI files that Maxwell saves off for you. And they really are essentially the saved render, this particular file, ready to open up again and make changes to, continue rendering, or make any changes like we've done here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the Educatorum file here at the very end, and we're just going to play around with it a little bit and go ahead and make some changes. Now you can see I've been in here already. I've made the nighttime version of our daytime file. You can see the grass here. You can see I've got my little street lamps on. I've got some light inside my building. Obviously no tenants have moved in here yet. It's build to suit. But let me show you how to go back to a daytime image here. If you've got a sun here, then you can crank it back to 1. Remember, the sun's always 1. Really the same thing with the physical sky. And then, of course, we don't need our street lamps if we're going to be in the daytime, and we can certainly cut back on some of this interior lighting. If not, just totally turn that all off. And then we'll go ahead and hit our refresh and get our daytime image that you saw there, which is my my screen or my image that I keep on my desktop. Okay, so that's it for our video demonstration, and of course this is just a few of the many features that Maxwell and formZ, tricks and things that can be done with those together. So feel free to give these both a try and learn as much as you can and have fun rendering. That's it for our video demonstration.